Welcome, everyone, to the Success Elevated podcast. As always, I'm your host, Hayden Lee, and I am joined this week by our co-host, you can call him, because he's been on I feel like probably half our episodes here, Derek Priest, managing partner here at Spot On Solutions. Derek, thanks for joining us this week as this week's co-host. Appreciate it.
You know what? I have been waiting long and hard for the opportunity for you to finally call me a co-host. So I was like, what?
Stop it.
How many episodes do I have to be on here before I reach?
Well, the threshold's like 10 to 15. I think we're there. I think we finally met your quota. So I think you're good now. So
all right, awesome. Well, I'm super excited and happy to be here today. So, and yes, thanks for inviting me back on.
No problem. I'm excited for our conversation today for a lot of different reasons, but I want to pass it to you. I'll let you kind of introduce who we're going to be talking to today and what we're going to be talking about, because I think it's pertinent to our audience, especially in the home services industry. And I think this gentleman's going to have a lot of insight into how we can help our clients. So Derek, I'll let you kind of intro this podcast.
Awesome. Well, and I'm super excited about this podcast too, because you know, Hayden, a lot of times, most of the time, you know, you find most of the people who are on this podcast and you do a fantastic job. But once in a while, the opportunity comes up where I'm having a conversation with a friend, with a colleague, with a peer, and what they have to say and what they're telling me just blows my mind and just gets me excited. And I'm like, all right, hold on. This is a topic that our listeners on the podcast will, number one, love, but can really, really benefit from. So anyway, so I'm super excited to have Chris on the podcast with us today. I'm happy to introduce Chris Hill. He has got, you're going to find out, he's got a wealth of knowledge. He's been a consultant in the restoration industry for a long time. His consulting efforts, and he'll clue us in on this, but his consulting efforts have taken him down the road of building and developing some amazing analytics tools that help business owners really understand, know, and about their business and how to grow their business based off of the numbers. You know, and it's like when I was talking to him the other day, he's like, listen, Derek, the numbers don't lie, right? You understand how to, what numbers you need to be looking at, and then how to analyze those numbers. Like, you can't fail as long as you pay attention to those numbers. And anyway, I was just, blown away. So Chris, welcome to the Success Elevated podcast. Super excited that you're here. I cannot wait to have you give us the knowledge and experience that you got today. So I'm glad you're here.
Well, I'm honored to be here, but gosh, to be here at a time that you're finally accepted at the level that you are is like the best.
You're the one that won me over, Chris. I was like, well, I guess Derek got Chris on the podcast. I guess we'll allow him to be the co-host. So
yeah, well, I'm glad to see he's getting his recognition as he should.
I love it.
The stars are aligning.
Yes. Well, and then I think that in and of itself is a great conversation. You know, Derek called me, gosh, I think it was last week when he kind of made the introduction, and very much so what he just described was like, Hayden, this guy, and we've worked with, we've been partnered with you, Chris, in one way or another for a little while now, but Derek called me last week and was like, gosh, we need to have Chris on the podcast. He was talking to me the other day about this and these numbers and why it's important. And he's like, and it would just be an awesome conversation for our listeners. And I think he's 100% right. And so I'm excited to just kind of sit in and listen to you chat a little bit today about all things knowing your numbers. But I think that's where we start, Derek, unless you have any other thoughts, but I think that's kind of the initial spot that we can kind of start here. Chris, you've been in the industry, as Derek described, for quite a while now, and you've been a consultant and you've helped restoration owners grow their businesses, I'm sure, through a variety of ways. Why do you feel that it's important for restoration, home service-based companies to truly know their numbers. And I don't know if you want to maybe talk a little bit about your background as far as what you've learned over the years, or if maybe there was a specific moment that you're like, gosh, this is why we have to know our numbers. But why is knowing your numbers so crucial to any small business?
Well, the biggest thing that numbers do for us is it helps remove the emotion and allows us to see things for what is. So often our gut tells us one thing, but our data tells us something other. And so to me, in my experience of running businesses, and guys, I've been running businesses for 35 years, everything from underground utility contracting businesses to restoration contractors, and see even my own consulting business. Data is still the foundation of which all decisions are made, which all truths are known. And so we can get emotional, and all of us owners can get emotional. But so often is we can move to the facts from a standpoint of what our numbers say. And as a consultant, I can tell you, I've been all over the United States, worked with over 150 clients in the last 12 years. And oftentimes we're dealing with the subject of margins, and even the personnel that produce those margins, your estimators, your project managers, and they'll hear me say, your numbers should improve. And they get emotional about it. They're very prideful about the work, and they should be. But then they've got some guy that got on a plane and flew out here and said, "Hey, you suck." That's not what I said, but that's what they think they heard, and they want to argue with me. And I will tell them, I said, "Listen, you don't need to believe me. Let's go look at your numbers, and let's let the numbers be the thing that drives what we know to be true. And if you're really well open to look at it, the numbers are going to be your best tool to propel you forward."
Oh,
and so,
yeah, it's amazing. I love that, just breaking it down that simple, Chris, that like numbers are emotionless, and that it's how you take emotion out of owning a business. And I love that concept, because, we talk to clients I talk to clients every single day that, these businesses are their babies, right? Like this is what they're in it, and they're working on it every single day. It's what they're passionate about. It's what they care about. Oftentimes they're employing other members of their family, like it's a huge part of their lives, and it can drive a lot of emotion, like you're talking. And you have to be able to take a step back and take this emotionless look at your business to truly know, hey, is this working? Can we grow this? Is this actually going to propel us in the future?
Yeah, it's interesting too, because most of these people are working their tails off. They work really hard. They care immensely. And so to have somebody say that it's not as good as it could be, or as good as the industry standard, it's confusing. And because they've never really seen numbers, they have nothing to base that foundation against. And so when you take a look at the biggest things that hold people back in their development and growth, it's the lack of true awareness of what accountability is, or what the numbers are.
I got to tell you though, I think that emotionless, that numbers don't have any emotion. I think that's probably incorrect in some way, because I've looked at numbers before, and I guarantee you I've had emotion when I've seen those numbers. So because they do tell a story, and oftentimes they can drive
some emotion. That's true, I guess. Yeah.
Yeah, I shouldn't say that there's no emotion, but you're right, Derek, is that sometimes it's like I'm exuberant. The numbers are that good, and there's other times I'm like, holy smokes, the numbers they got to be wrong.
Yeah.
But still, the interesting thing is that as we begin people to look at these numbers and really gain a foundation for tracking, all of a sudden they have better information to know where the improvement is. Part of the emotion is people are like, I can't work any harder. I don't know how I get better. Yeah. And so to me, it's the beginning, but it's also the means of which you gain control over it. So we have a lot of fun with it, although there's plenty of times I'm up against lots of opposition with this.
I'm sure you are.
Well, to your point, I'd like to I think I'd like to dive in even just a little bit further, Chris. Do you feel like, so we've kind of established, that's kind of why it's important. Obviously, so you've been consulting now, you said, for 12 years. I'd like to kind of hear the story, if you don't mind. Was it the chicken or the egg? Do you feel like you got into consulting because you knew numbers were important and wanted to help your clients understand that? Or did you get into consulting, started helping some businesses, and then realized, oh, wow, the numbers are the thing we have to focus on? Was it kind of, when you first got into this, kind of talk a little bit about how you first got into consulting, if you don't mind, and kind of share.
So in every business management scenario, in every business management I've had, I've always found myself to rely heavily on the numbers, much like a pilot relies on their instruments. You have to have some foundation of truth. But when I was running a company called Clean Right Build Right out of California, I really found we grew tremendously, and I found in that growth that the only way I could stay ahead of things was to really pay attention to what was happening numerically. And it's a lot of work to keep the numbers accurate, but it was the one piece that allowed me to stay centered in what we were doing. And as I continued to grow, we had consulting help as well, working with us, helped me tremendously to teach me to focus on this. So I have to give a lot of credit to the people that consulted us. But at some point, the stress of 110 employees and the fact that my body turned 50, my mind didn't, and it still isn't 50, but my body turned 50. It decided to stop handling the stress the same way, and so I found I needed to make some changes for my health and to move to a place that was less stressful. After being consulted for 5 years, I thought, well, I could do that. And of course, the other thing that was kind of funny is I'd go to conferences, and you guys have all been at conferences where you're standing in breakout sessions and people in groups of 6 and 8 and 10 people, and people would ask me questions that about maybe how we did something. And I remember as I started to answer, there would be like E.F. Hutton moment where not only would everybody in the group be listening in, but people from other groups would be leaning in to hear what I had to say. And I was struck odd by it at first, because it was kind of like, wait a second, you guys do what I do. Why don't you know what I know? I mean, why is what I'm about to say so important to everybody? And I still don't know really the answer to that, but I began to realize that people want to hear what I have to say. And so it gave me the confidence to say, yeah, I could do this. And I really enjoyed helping people. And it gave me a means of taking advantage of the strength that I had of business for 35 years in 5 different industries, and really be able to apply it to people and help, and have the fun of what we do without the stress.
Yeah.
So that's where my beginning in consulting happened. And what was funny is you read all these studies that talk about how you start a consulting business, and they want you to have 1 to 2 years income put away. And I didn't have any of that stuff. But virally, people knew that I was really good at adapting to software and how they optimize their software to get to numbers. And so virally, my business grew almost immediately, just like that.
That's so cool. Derek, did you have something? Sorry.
No. I love that. I love hearing the story, because everybody's story is unique on how they get into things. And, we're talking about numbers, and we've got a lot of people on this, listen to this podcast that are in different phases, obviously, of their business. And you mentioned that you've helped quite a number of clients across the United States do this. And so you've probably seen it all. You've seen the really, really good. You've probably seen the really, really bad. But if I'm I don't know, say a business owner that I'm, into business for, a year down the road or 2 years down the road, we talk about KPIs, we talk about what are the things that we really should be paying attention to. Tell our listeners, from obviously a 360, a broad look at it, what are some of those key indicators that are the most important things they need to be paying attention to if they want to grow their business? Like where would you start?
Well, it really, I think a lot of businesses are different, but for the most part, all businesses have a model built around what their expenses are. And so you got to know your break-even point. You got to know how much business I need to do to be in business. Mm-hmm. In other words, to cover the cost of what it exists to be here. Now, we all get in business because we don't want to break even. We want to be profitable. But to me, there's still a point of understanding, what is our hard cost? What are we going to pay no matter whether we sell anything or build anything? What are we going to have in the way of costs that we need to make sure that we have enough volume in excess of that? And so to me, that at the very simplest core, we need to know that number. But along with that, there's a lot of things that happen from the standpoint of understanding our sales process. I know a lot of people that are very busy with all their people working, but they don't find themselves successful. They don't find themselves still hitting sales goals. And they'll ask me, well, do I need to spend more money on marketing, for instance? And the answer might be maybe, but to me, I always like to make some distinctions. And this is really important with numbers, is do you have a sales issue? Meaning, are we not selling as well as we could? Do we have opportunities that are coming in that we're not being successful with? Or do we have a marketing issue? In other words, is it a question of, hey, we're selling really well of the opportunities that hit us, but maybe we just don't have enough opportunities? I'm amazed at how often when I answer that question, ask that question, how many people don't know the answer to that. And so to me,
Definitely.
when people set their sales goals for the year, it may be just picking it out of the sky. But to me, I always looked at it that says, hey, if I want to do $3 million a year in water, one of the first things I had to know is, what is my typical average water job? And if I knew it was $3,000, then I could begin to do the math to figure out, well, what kind of quantities do I need to get, considering that my sales capture ratio might be 80%, and then break it down to a monthly number. And now, as I look at my numbers and I'm maybe subpar where I want to be, I can identify, well, did we have enough opportunities to even come in for us to be successful? And if we didn't, then certainly it could be a marketing issue that we need to be more effective in getting those leads. And sometimes it's, no, we have more than enough opportunity. We're just not very good at selling it. Okay, well, then let's go to work on our sales process. So sales drives everything, guys. Nothing usually happens until we sell something.
You're exactly right. And
yeah, that's music. That's music to Derek's ears, because Derek 100% agrees with that. That you're not growing a bit, and it's true. It's not so whether or not that's an opinion. That's the truth, right? Like, sales is how you grow a business, and if your sales process isn't good, your business growth is going to be stagnant, 100%, and probably to a point. I mean, Derek, you can speak to this, I know for sure, and I'm sure you've seen the same, Chris, that like your business will actually start to go the opposite, not even grow, or even maintain. You're going to lose business, and your business is going to shrink if your sales process isn't good. And right. And that comes back to, in a lot of ways, like better understanding your numbers. You mentioned something there that really resonated with me, Chris. I mean, I've spoken with, people, and this isn't just in our industry. I've spoken with other people that own businesses as well. And whether it's in the service industry or wherever, that couldn't tell you, and they, own a small business, couldn't tell you what their average job size is or what their average order size is. And that's like such a crucial number to better understanding if any of this stuff is working for you, if your sales process is working, or if your marketing is working. I know it's something I talk to clients all the time about. Hey, what is your average job size? I had a great call a couple of weeks ago with a client of mine that, we were having a conversation about cost per lead, and we were looking at their digital marketing, and, that individual was a little shocked at first when we talked about what the cost per lead was. But then as we kind of talked through what their numbers were, they were like, oh, our margins are still great because I know what our average job size is. And I was like, yeah, see, there you go. Like you're everything's, and we had a great strategy meeting because they really knew what their numbers were. And we were able to have, kind of build off of that into the future. And so like something as simple as just knowing what your average job size is huge. It's super, super important.
Exactly. And then along with that, to me, it's always interesting that cash flow really drives a lot. You can have a very successful business, but if they don't understand the cash in and the cash out equation, then it's very easy for them to get too blocked and find themselves without resources of doing business. And I can tell you, I had a client that had $7 million in accounts receivable, had sold a lot of work, performed a lot of work, but unfortunately, his collections efforts and the scenarios that he was dealing with his insurance customers, they were starving him out, not paying him to the point that he had exhausted his line of credit, exhausted all means of cash position to even make payroll. And it was literally, a very successful business that was on the brink of bankruptcy simply because of cash flow. So you've got to pay attention to that money coming in and going out, and you have to know what those numbers are.
Do you feel like, and this is probably, again, you've hit at some of the challenges, and so this is probably just a reiteration of those, right? Cash flow, I know for sure, is a challenge in the restoration industry. But are there any other challenges that maybe people don't know about as much? Cash flow is probably the number one thing that I hear most of, my clients, and Derek, I'm sure you could agree that the cash flow is probably one of the biggest things that is always a worry, right? You're dealing with insurance and waiting on, bills to come in. But are there any other challenges that you've noticed kind of relating to this conversation of knowing your numbers? Are there any other challenges in the home service industry that you feel like a lot of business owners need to know about? Go ahead.
Yeah, the single biggest challenge they have is their labor. Okay, honest to God, but that's all businesses right now. But what's interesting is that when you really look at this industry, it was evolved out of businesses that made a lot of profit, so the profit forgave a lot of sin. And as a result of it, people could run blindly, not really know their numbers, and still make it. But do you know what I mean when I say that? Is they made so much profit that even if they weren't running really efficient, they still made it.
Yep.
They always had money coming in. But as we've evolved in our industry and we've seen a lot more corporate influence into this, we began to really get better at our numbers, and software is developed as well. And so I would rate that there's three different kinds of companies out there. There's still companies that are running old school that say, look, I got enough money in the bank, my people are happy, we're good, I don't care about numbers. And then there's people that want the numbers, but they don't know how to get it. And then there's people that are entirely driven by the numbers. But the single biggest hinge point on that is whether they can get their people to behave consistently in using the software and using the tools and documenting in a way that the numbers are actually truthful. That's probably one of the biggest challenges I see. And with our analytic tool, I can tell you guys, there's never a client, never, that we don't put on our product where we don't discover huge holes in their data as a result of simple things, little things like entering a date that takes 30 seconds to enter. I've seen companies have misforecasted sales of over $1.2 million. And that was 10 minutes of looking at their data, and we found $1.2 million, where simply because somebody didn't either put in a contract amount or they didn't put in a date, that number was missing from their sales figures. So to me, probably one of the biggest Achilles heels to using numbers to run your business is, do we have the consistent behavior performed by our staff to allow the numbers to read true?
Well, and to your point, Chris, this is an industry that is so closely tied to insurance. Obviously, like if you don't dot your I's and cross all your T's, like that can be the difference between getting paid or not, right? Like if you're not working on those details, and what you're talking about is more tracking maybe internally, but developing some of those patterns can help you then maybe get paid faster because your team is used to being really detailed and documenting everything and making sure you've got good information, because if you don't do that, you might not get paid, or at least it's going to be super delayed. You could turn a 60-day turnaround on a check for an insurance job to a 120-day turnaround, or even longer if you're not dotting those I's and crossing those T's. And, just to go back to that point, I like some of those detailed pieces obviously relate to knowing your numbers, but just to owning and operating a restoration business in general, like it's crucial, super, super crucial.
I've seen so many companies that are very prideful about their success in their business, and then when we show them that there's no way their numbers could be telling them the truth, and I'm not saying there can't be some truth. All data is representative of some truth. It's just, is it the complete truth? And when you realize that 60% of their information is askew because it's just doesn't have the right effort into it, then all of a sudden it gets a little frightening because you start to have less confidence about what it's telling you. There has to be a sense of urgency. The number one key to get it straightened out is consistent measurement. So often when we help people see what is, the next step is how do we improve it? And I always tell them that measurement is the lifeblood of improvement of data. If you find that you want something to be improved, find a way to measure it consistently, and all of a sudden people will be formed in such a way that you'll have it.
You know, I think I just heard, I mean, I've been thinking as, you know, we're talking today, we're talking about numbers, we talked the other day. I think about even things in our business as well too. And one of the things that you pointed out the other day when you and I were chatting is, I mean, I think businesses don't pay a lot of attention to the value of lost opportunities. For example, like for example, I mean, even we struggle to some degree with this as well too. Like when we have an opportunity that then doesn't pan out, we don't make that sale, right? You know, we may have been assuming, hey, if we sell this job, we're gonna make X, right? If we don't make that sale, well, that just goes into the lost column, but we're not paying attention to how all of those lost opportunities and the value of those lost opportunities adds up. And you were showing me the other day, it's like, okay, well, these guys have, X number of dollars of potential work, yet this is the work that they're doing. And sometimes there's a big discrepancy in that. And then, so what does that tell you? Like, looking at those two things, what does it tell you? It's not just another lost job. It's $1.5 million worth of potential lost jobs that we neglected to sell, right? And it's just I guess that's kind of a light bulb moment to me. It's like when you see at the end of the day, at the end of the month, at the end of the quarter, at the end of the year, hey, you know what? We had X number of opportunities, and these opportunities would have been X, but we only closed this many. That will help you, I think. That's one of those emotional moments, like, oh crap, if we would have just had a better sales process, we would have had this much more to our bottom line.
Well, if you look at our industry, restoration industry, they spend somewhere between business development. And so to me, if they're losing 40% of the work and they want to go spend more money, more than the 10% to get more opportunities, I say it's cheaper to figure out how to sell the opportunities you've already spent money to get.
Mm-hmm. Yeah.
And so to me, it's always about, let's get efficient with this. I don't want to be bigger at sucking than I'd rather.
I'm writing that down. I don't want to be bigger at sucking.
Okay.
It's totally right though.
Well, and I just try to put things in a way that would make sense. And sometimes as a consultant, our job is to interrupt patterns of thinking and jar people. And I'm not saying that we're not tactful, but sometimes the way I can say it is going to make them go, I hadn't thought about it that way. You're right. Let's get better at this.
Yeah.
And so to me, there's a lot to looking at this. And I always say, guys, I cut my teeth in this industry as a director of marketing. That's where I started. Mm-hmm. I had a $700,000 budget on marketing. I loved it. I got to do a lot of fun stuff, but I also wanted to make sure that paid for stuff, that we're getting our money's worth out of that. Mm-hmm. And so part of that is not just did we make the phone ring, did we get the opportunity to hit our door, is what did we do with it once we got it? And are we positioning ourselves for success? And if we lost it, did we lose it because we weren't responsive quick enough? Did we lose it because we didn't handle the call very well on the phone? Did we lose it because of some numeric reason? Generally speaking, there was a human challenge there as to why somebody didn't believe us. And I love it when these companies put in the reason they lost and they say, chose another contractor. Well, that may be true. They did choose another contractor, but I like to go, well, why did they choose somebody else? Why didn't they choose you?
Yeah.
And that's a better answer. You're going to get more information than just saying, oh, they chose somebody else. Yeah.
I said, this is a fall on your sword moment to where then later when you see that your numbers aren't as good, you can use this forensically to go, I see where I could improve. Let me begin to look at things here. And anybody that's ever sold in their life has had tough sales lessons where they realize that somewhere along the line, I failed to listen to that customer and what they needed. And as a result of it, they bought from somebody that gave them the answers they wanted. In our case, maybe it was the timing, maybe it was the service, whatever it is we still have to pay attention to that. And part of the problem with our restoration industry is so many people don't think of themselves as salespeople. They think of themselves as an estimator. My job is to write an estimate. But the reality of it is somebody still has to influence that customer's decision. Somebody has to get them to say, you know what, I pick you.
It's awesome.
I agree.
It's awesome. And asking yourself those tough questions, you've got to be willing to do it. And it's hard. I think it's hard to ask yourself those tough questions personally. So then you take it to a business level where there's like money on the line and can even be more difficult, but it's crucial. Like you have to be able to ask, okay, why did that customer choose a different contractor? Or why did that customer not use us? Or they chose us. What was the reason they chose us? And, yeah, I love the idea. You said forensics there. It makes me think like CSI or something, right? Like I love the idea of like really like looking at the details and trying to figure out, okay, why did they choose us? Why didn't they choose us? Why was this job larger than this job? If we're really talking numbers or whatever, why was this job more profitable than this job? And doing those types of really, forensic analysis of those jobs can make the difference.
And now you're getting at the root of what numbers do for you. So often we look at a result and we go, it's not what we want it to be. And now we want to start asking why. But if we don't have good distinguishing patterns of data, then we aren't able to drill in to really answer that. So for instance, if I look at somebody whose sales appear to be low, I could immediately have a knee-jerk reaction that they don't sell very well or they suck. But maybe we had a loss event that hit that just flooded us with opportunities. We couldn't get to them all. And as a result of it, we have a false low. Okay. Or maybe we're getting a whole bunch of work from a certain vendor program or a certain insurance company that they just seem to be exercising us, but they never really allow us to get the work. And so maybe the issue isn't the individual at all. Maybe it's the particular place we're getting the work. And so these are great questions to be able to make distinctions about, to really begin to evaluate where the improvement can be. Sometimes it's, I'm going to stop doing their work.
Yeah.
You got to figure out whether the juice is worth the squeeze.
100%. That was almost exactly what I was going to say. Like you got to find out if that avenue is worth going down that path. Yeah. I mean, because
and then you brought up the other side of that is, even if the work we're getting, say I'm selling it very successfully, maybe the profit on it's terrible.
Yeah.
So now I'm being to exercise all these resources to buy warranty and liability for no profit.
Yeah. Yeah. You're what's the saying? I'm going to butcher the saying. Tripping over pennies to make dimes or something. I don't know. I don't know what the saying is. There's some kind of saying where it's like, there's something you could be getting a very easy, it might be a smaller margin, but it maybe doesn't require a lot of labor, a lot of time, or, I don't know. It's just, there's so many important pieces there to really being able to like, okay.
Yeah,
we had these jobs. They're big on the revenue sheet. They look awesome. Wow. We just did a $500,000 job in a commercial building, but the profits were terrible, and we wasted all this time on it. And, there's so many important pieces there. And I think, more so than I don't want to say more so than anything else, because obviously you're big on coaching these businesses to learn this stuff, but you've also helped develop a tool that can help them better understand their numbers. Cause it's one thing to just be told, you don't want to be, what was the quote you wrote down, Derek? Bigger at sucking?
I don't want to be bigger at sucking.
Yeah. So it's one thing to be told that, but then to maybe have a tool that can help you not be bigger at sucking, I think is even an additional help there. So Chris, if you don't mind, I'd love to hear a little bit about how JOC analytics fits into all of this, because we've talked about the importance of it, and we've talked about why you've got to know those things, but what can a person do? What can a person that owns a small business do?
So what JOC has done is they've utilized my business intelligence platform to put together a group of slides, if you will, that are pulling all of the critical information from our clients' job management software, accounting software, et cetera. And even though you can get a lot of these reports directly from the software, the speed at which we can provide it and the ability to quickly delineate through it is like thousands of times faster. And so, for instance, if you walked into our slide that deals with sales capture ratios, you can immediately get side-by-side comparison of all the people that are selling. You can see things by job type. You can see things by referral source. You can see things by insurance company. And all of a sudden, every question that we just talked about can be answered in seconds with maybe 5 to 10 mouse clicks.
Wow.
And so having the ability to arrive at your decisions quicker through analyzing your data is a key element. And this tool literally puts this on steroids. And the beauty of this is that nobody that is buying our tool is actually having to do anything other than give us a login to their software. And we literally put everything else together and change their world.
It's amazing.
And so to me, I used to spend 12 hours a month when I ran a restoration company just dumping stuff to Excel for recognition and for business analytics, so I knew what to do. That 12 hours generally netted me great tools, but they were good for that moment in time. With our tool, it's always built, always. All I have to do is open it and look at it. And I can come to any of these conclusions at a moment's notice, and it saves me the 12 hours a month. It saves our clients' people's time for just updating jobs and updating the software. And so the idea of it is our world is moving faster and faster. People are buying some great tools, and there's some great platforms out there, whether it's Dash, Restoration Manager, PSA, Albiware, Accelerate. I mean, I could go through all the different softwares and QuickBooks. And they all have great tools within themselves to run reports, but this tool just takes everything and puts it on steroids, puts it in one place, and with just single mouse clicks, you can delineate through it and really begin to make distinctions.
Well, and yeah, I mean, it's amazing. Your description is, if your description is not amazing enough, I can offer a little bit additional to that. You know, again, when Derek jumped on the call with me last week, I was like, gosh, we got to have Chris on. He showed me some things that you had shown him. So I don't know if it was just some screenshots or what. And then Derek, kind of communicated those to me, but just looking at the data that you had there, and it was, like you said, readily accessible. I don't have to go in and build an Excel spreadsheet to figure all this stuff out. I just had to give we just had to give the keys to you. And then we can have like an updated report that shows all of these amazing numbers, your revenue and your profits and what's working, what's not. And it's an amazing tool that can just simplify all that for you. And you don't have to spend 12 hours a month, like you're describing, putting it all together.
And on top of that, most of our clients are spending, if they don't have any customization, I think they're spending about $7,000 a year to have this tool.
Yeah.
And in the realm of their business, that is really inexpensive for them to have data at their fingertips. So,
there's invoicing software and when you talk about QuickBooks and all the other things, all the other softwares you mentioned that cost way more than that. And this provides all of that information at the click of a button. So,
and when
awesome.
When we built this tool, we built it around my consulting model. In other words, I have a behavior model that says, if you behave this way, this is how you'll get the best results. But when I teach companies and what they need to look at, then this tool has all the slides built to give them those things. So where you don't have to work so hard to go find it. I'm just going to tee it up for you, and you just get to go through it. And so that's one of the things that's been so fun for me, is it kind of combines the consulting that I do into a tool that allows it to make it easier for somebody to actually do the things I ask them to do. In some ways, it's actually cut me out of consulting dollars, but it's okay.
But it's also probably saved you some time, because you don't have to be like, oh, let's jump on a call and do all this. It's like, hey, have you looked at your report? Have you looked at this information? Because it's all there for you, man. And it was a really cool conversation I had with Derek, and obviously we talked with you more about it today, but the information that it can be at your fingertips, if you're willing to just look for it a little bit, it's incredible. And it can make all the difference in truly growing your business, or at least setting your business up in a better space than it was yesterday. Right. And maybe you're not necessarily growing as far as revenue, but you have way more profit, and you can hire more employees, and you can maybe grow your business that way, and help you impact more people without necessarily saying, oh, we went from a $3 million business to a $4 million business last year. It's awesome. It's awesome.
Yeah. Everybody out there that's ever grown a business will tell you that that at some point their business grew, but their profit didn't. And they begin to realize that optimal space of where they run their business. And sometimes the learning curve is steep, but it's still nice to be able to have better tools that allow you to track through it. And that's really what we're about, is providing, to be people's partner, to provide them those tools.
That's awesome.
Love it. Derek, well, do you have any other, before we kind of close things up today with Chris? I don't want to keep him too much longer. I feel like he's given us so much awesome information. Any other questions that you have for Chris, or any other additional, things you'd like to mention?
Well, I have tons of questions, but no, seriously. And I could talk to Chris for hours about it. But I told you that this was going to be super awesome when he joined us today. So, I mean, Chris, I got thousands of questions, but we have,
I think we might have to have Chris back on
limited amount of time on this, on the podcast. I want, we started down the road of, what are those KPIs, right? And we got partially into two of them, right? Well, and like I said, you told me when we were talking about the other day, was it 5? Was it 5 numbers that everybody needs, that they need to know? Or anyway, like I want to ask you a whole bunch, and we'll have another conversation about this. But yeah, I do want to, I want to put a plug in, and I'll let Chris do this as well too. But I mean, our listeners, you need to check out Chris at jocanalytics.com. If you're in the restoration industry, Chris, we're going to be at a show together here pretty soon. Am I right? In a few weeks.
Yep. End of the month.
So we're going to be at the Collective by Core in Austin, Texas. Mm-hmm. So the end of this month, if you're going to be at that event, or if you're thinking about that event, make sure that you head over to Chris's booth. Do you know what booth you're at? I don't even know what booth we're at.
I think it's 411, I think.
Okay. Make sure you get over there and pick this guy's brain, because there's a lot of stuff in there. So.
I love it. Well, Chris, I wouldn't be doing my job as a podcast host if I didn't ask you the same questions at the end of every show that we ask all of our other guests. We do this as a way to just kind of unite and have some really awesome answers from all of our guests that are similar. And it's a great way to kind of reflect back on all of our episodes. But first question that I want to close up with: favorite book or podcast that you've read or listened to recently, or maybe not even recently, but one that you just love to recommend to people?
Probably my favorite book that I've recommended the last 2 years is a book called Propeller. It's a national bestseller. It says accelerating change by getting accountability right. And accountability is defined differently than I probably thought about it with this book, but it's probably the single most implementable tool for developing an accountable culture. It's awesome. And so I highly recommend that book. I quote it often. I use it often, and it literally is the foundation of how we really get people accountable. So that's probably one of my favorites lately. There's a lot of great books out there, but that's been one of my favorites lately.
Who wrote that book?
It's written by Tanner Coleridge, Jared Jones, Craig Hickman, and Tom Smith. This is a follow-up book, or sequel, if you will, to the Oz Principle. If anybody's ever read the Oz Principle.
I haven't read it, but that does sound super familiar.
Yeah, but it's a great book, and very, very sensible to implement.
Love it. I'm looking it up.
Derek's probably going to add it to his cart right now while we're talking.
Well, I don't want to look like I'm working while I'm talking, but yeah, Amazon is going to be on my screen here.
It's $15.87 on Amazon. I have it up on my screen, or you can get it on Audible.
Awesome.
Yeah.
Love it.
Second question, Chris. You obviously are wearing multiple different hats with both your consulting and JOC Analytics. How do you relax at the end of a long day? What are some ways that you recharge your mental, emotional batteries?
Well, believe it or not, to me, this business is how I serve. And to me, I get a lot of revitalizing of my batteries just by engaging with people and serving them. And that means a lot to me. But I live in the country in Northern California. I've been married for 42 years today, and I have 3 grandkids. So anytime I get to spend time with those folks, it's good. And then I'll just turn my camera around and show you guys that I have the best view of any office you'll ever see.
Oh my gosh.
And so oftentimes, if nothing else, a cold adult beverage floating on that water with my wife doesn't get any better than that.
I would have to agree with you. I think that's a pretty sweet sweet
awesome
gig.
Yeah.
Derek does the same thing, but at his pool in Texas. So he's fully aware of being on the water and enjoying some free time. So
yes,
he gets it.
Yes.
Last question, Chris, before we, let you go today. You could rewind to the beginning of your career, rewind to the beginning of your consulting career, or maybe it's the beginning of your career in restoration, and tell younger Chris one thing. What would that one thing be?
I got to tell you, I was really challenged by this question because as I thought about it, of course, there would be obvious things that I think I would tell myself so I wouldn't fail, but it's in those failures I learned so much. I don't even think I would have the ability to consult today if I hadn't been through some of those things. So I think that my resolve myself to say, find a way to enjoy everything you do and take note and learn as much as you can as you go through it. You have to trust that that's part of the process.
That's really perfect. Perfect way to close things up. Chris, thank you. This was an awesome podcast. Thoroughly enjoyed it. Felt like I learned a lot, and I know our audience is going to feel the same way as well. You can check Chris out for those listening. Check Chris out at JCMH Consulting, as well as JOC Analytics. I got the acronyms right, Chris? Okay, perfect. Yes. I got the acronyms right. JCMH Consulting and JOC Analytics. Websites for both of those. You can learn more about what Chris does as far as consulting goes, as well as the power of the tools that JOC Analytics offers. And check out both those websites. We'll have them linked in the description. Chris, thanks again for coming on today. This was awesome.
Thanks for having me. I'd love to come back anytime.
Let's do it. We're going to have you back so that Derek can ask you all of his thousands of questions. So
I will continue. The list continues to grow.
It's going to be awesome. And it's all going to be helpful.
Well, and actually I'm going to cheat, and I'm going to see, like I said, I'm going to see Chris in person.
Oh yeah. You'll see him in person. So perfect.
15 days. And so we're going to share some close booth space. So I'm picking his brain that whole time. So I'm excited.
There you go.
Thanks, Chris. We appreciate it.
You bet, guys. Have a good one.
This has been Success Elevated, making you a little bit better one show at a time. Thanks for joining us. Please subscribe on YouTube or any other major podcast platform to listen to more episodes. We are proudly brought to you by Spot On Solutions. If you'd like to learn more about how we can help you grow your business, please check us out at spotonsolutions.com.